It's been 2 weeks since Francis was back on the Pluto Show. You're not J.R. Jackson.
I'm not?
No.
Oh, yeah, I'm not.
You don't look anything like
You're
him
right,
either.
I don't.
Who are you?
And I don't have an American accent. I don't support the Dodgers. Man,
Anything
everyone's
else?
going to be upset. I
Anything
think that's...
else?
I don't support... Does he support the Raiders? No, he like supports the Rams.
LA Rams.
Yeah.
Francis Maxwell back on the Pluto Show. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you. It's
We're
a pleasure.
shooting this on your birthday, even though it doesn't go up on your birthday.
Yes, happy birthday to me.
Born
24,
in
I'm not a year older.
1972, Francis
You're right.
Maxwell looks so good for 40-something years old.
Go and jump up a cliff.
Our first story today, as you see from our rundown on the left or the right of your screen, whichever side, even I get confused sometimes, is worst player in the NBA, question mark. There's a picture of Nick Young because he's one of the absolute worst players in the NBA. But it really, as Francis was talking right before the show, it should be called the worst known player in the NBA.
Yeah.
There's probably a few guys out there who come and play in between the D-League and then the NBA itself, back and forth, that really don't get any publicity. However, I must state this because if not the comment section, everybody else in the world just shreds and shreds and shreds. These guys are all better than you. Obviously. They're all better at basketball. I can promise you a Division III basketball player who played 5 minutes a game in college would trump anybody in a pickup game near your house. However, it's not going to stop us from talking about guys who are just so comparable to the worst in the NBA that we've seen in the past that we need to make a list. So I made a list, right? I didn't make the list, actually. I just took the list.
Complex made the list.
Complex Sports made the list and did an okay job all around. I like Complex Sports a lot, and I want to shred them for no reason. However, some of their reasoning was, this player's just old AF. Can't say it, monetization, YouTube, all that fun stuff.
I get it.
But the young generation knows what I'm talking about. Here is the list itself. I have number 25 through 6 first. There's just the disrespect on Paul Pierce. Paul Pierce, even though his numbers are nothing to what they were as compared to years ago, can never be on a list of the 25 worst players in the NBA today. For that reason, for the reasoning alone that, guess what, he can still hit very, very clutch game-winning shots as he did not too long ago. Jason Terry's another guy that shouldn't be anywhere near this list.
Chris Anderson, the Birdman.
What's
What's your problem?
Chris Anderson, Udonis Haslem shouldn't be on this list for the most part. Nick Collison is someone who shouldn't even be close to this list. However, they ranked Nick Young number 25. He should be way higher. We haven't seen Yi play in the NBA in like 3 years. He was last seen in 2012 when he was in the NBA, and then he played in China for a little bit. Maybe he's come back a different player. Sauce Castillo is going to get a lot of playing time with the Philadelphia 76ers, but actually comparatively, and his true shooting percentage being in the toilet, is actually something that should be on this list. Obviously, everyone knows my love for Austin Rivers on this platform. So Sasha Vujacic, another guy that should be mentioned. JaVale McGee, Shaqtin' a full MVP, might be a NBA champion because he's playing on the Warriors.
I think that it's the category should be players that get a lot of playing time, that are given the respect as if they are good but are actually awful. So like what you mentioned
That doesn't fit in the title.
That doesn't fit in the
get
title.
Like 80 characters.
It's not as clickable, but yeah, Paul Pierce, not a chance. Like if you're comparing them to old Paul Pierce from Boston Celtics, yeah, he's not as good. That's what happens when you get older. As you mentioned, can still make clutch shots. Haslem as well. I think it's so disrespectful to put him in there. But the players that I'm considering on this list are the players that are given a certain level of respect, a certain level of minutes, so that they have the ability to prove it. Because you can say someone's awful and they play 2 minutes a game, and you're like, oh, they're awful, but you don't see them enough to make that accurate statement. I think Nick Young, undoubtedly, a guy that tries to make threes from anywhere, Steph Curry range, runs away with his hands in the air before it's even reached the rim, thinking it's going in. That's a player that I think is one of the worst in the NBA because he thinks he's a lot better than he is. Austin Rivers.
If you're dumb enough to play in Yeezy boots, you're dumb enough to be, I shouldn't say that. If you're bad enough to play in Yeezy boots thinking that that's going to help your game, you should be on anybody's top 10 worst in the NBA list.
Yeah, I think the Yeezy boots I'm for them going into the Football League, as we mentioned. I think they're going to be good.
On the court.
Yeah, I think that Austin Rivers is one of the prime examples because Austin Rivers is constantly granted the ability, especially if you get Chris Paul going out and he steps in to try and run point at times or steps in to try and run in a position, he's nowhere near good enough to be considered as on a team that is trying to vie for a chance in the Western Conference.
What's funny about Austin Rivers is, like, I rip on Austin Rivers all the time, and everyone knows this. And part of the reason is you have one of the greatest point guards in the league on your team. However, that effect is not crossed over. You would think being a backup to Chris Paul would just make you a competent enough point guard to be a starter on one of the 15 teams that doesn't have a good starting point guard. But he's not, right? He's had moments of brilliance Actually, every one of those players on that list has had moments of brilliance. But the consistency issue, the turnovers, the lack of being able to run a pick and roll at times at the point guard position in the NBA is going to keep you on that list. He's not as bad as I make him out to be. He is in the bottom tier of NBA players. And really, on other teams, would possibly be fighting for minutes off the bench or their last guy. Let's go to the top 5, because the top 5 they had for worst players in the NBA is actually pretty close. James Young's a great example of the one player that Danny Ainge, not the one player, but one of the known players that Danny Ainge put a lot of stock into for the Boston Celtics, and it didn't work out. Half his time is spent in Maine in the D-League, half his time in the NBA. He averages, 1-2 points per game. That's a good example. Anthony Bennett is spearheaded towards the worst number 1 overall pick in the history of the NBA. I mean, it's bad. He's making Kwame Brown look like relevant, useful, competent, whatever word you want to use. PJ Harrison has not worked out in the NBA. Kyle Singler, thank God he got rid of his. It's so mean, but it is funny, and I'm gonna point it out. Like last year in the playoffs, they said like when the Thunder were getting blown out in a few of the games, even though they were the best team in the playoffs last year, those few games where they were getting blown out, and they put Kyle Singler in. People were tweeting like, "Oh, Singler's in, changing the channel to Friends on Netflix," and they were also throwing up the memes of Simple Jack from Tropic Thunder. So it's one thing to put in the worst 5 players in the NBA. It's another thing when they're just like
ripping on him
you make me happy.
One player that I see that gets ripped apart non-stop, again, we've gone back to the original slide of the list, Dion Waiters. It's hard. The only reason is Dion Waiters constantly wants the ball. He constantly wants it so that he makes it seem that he has got the ability to take. You're distracting me trying to do that. I can't do it because.
Well, what do you think it was like for KD and Russ when like Dion Waiters is screaming at them going down the court in the past few years, going?
I've lost my train of thought.
I don't blame you, because that's what it's like playing with him. KD's bringing up the ball. He's like, I probably should be taking this shot. What's that in the corner of my head? Dion, go away, dude. Go away, Dion. I don't need you. And they'd push him into like the far left corner of the last peg, the last possible corner of the court, and he'd still be sitting there being like, hey!
He passed I think he was decent in the playoffs against Golden State. I think he came up with some good moments.
I'm being mean. He had when he was passing. This is how you know Dion Waiters, when he passes the ball, as you were alluding to. We were all sitting there going like, oh my God, he had an open layup and he went for the pass. What did Billy Donovan tell Dion Waiters before this game?
And that's when you have players that I don't think should be considered the worst, because they just make bad decisions. They just.
You still can't get it. Hey, I'm open.